Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in about 1 or 2 minutes. We're just going to let everybody have a chance to file in, and then we'll get going. So just hang tight, and we'll be with you in about a minute. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Putting Excellence in Your Testing Center of Excellence. I am your moderator today. My name is Brent Jenkins, Marketing Manager here at Checkpoint Technologies, and presenting today is our President and Co-founder, Bob Cruz. Bob, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you, Brent, and I would really like to thank everybody for joining us today. And one of the things I do want to emphasize right up front is please feel free to submit any questions while we're going through the webinar. Brent and I are going to do our best to get to all the questions. But a little bit about myself. I've been in IT now for about 29 years, started as a COBOL, IBM DB2 developer back in the day. So as you can imagine, I've seen IT and specifically testing evolve significantly. Just about 18 years ago, I developed a real passion for quality assurance. So for such things as automated testing, risk analysis, test planning, etc. And today I'm very excited to be discussing with you the creation of a testing center of excellence. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Brent.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Bob. So before we begin, I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a background about us, Checkpoint Technologies. So what we do and our main purpose is to enable organizations to deliver higher quality applications to market faster. We were incorporated in January of 2003, so we're actually celebrating our 15th year in business. We handle all things QA and QC, especially focused on functioning, performance, and application security testing. We are proud partners with some best-of-breed software solutions like Micro Focus, Atlassian, Cobaton, Mobile Labs, QA Symphony, Ranorex, and Zephyr, as well as a QAI training partner. For those of you who don't know, QAI stands for Quality Assurance Institute, and they do a lot of training worldwide, based out of Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. They're actually based out of their U.S. headquarters is actually in Orlando.
That's right.
But they have an exceptionally large, a great user group up in the Chicago area. And then I'm actually on the board of the Tampa Bay Quality Assurance Association, which is a QAI chapter.
Awesome. And then as far as services that we provide, we do staff augmentation. So if you need any kind of testing resources, whether it be short-term or long, on-site or remote, we can provide that to you. Some of those resources that we provide are things like manual testers, automation experts, QA leads, SDETs, and more. And then we also do consulting. So anything from assessing your processes, your QA processes, your automation, that sort of thing, configurations, we can handle that for you. And then there's outsourcing. which is our kind of form of onshoring. So if you need a functional or performance testing team based around here, we can provide that for you. And then we do training and mentoring as well. So training we do on-site, virtual, or public on all things around QA and software testing. So anything from Agile testing or mobile testing, that sort of thing. And then mentoring, where we'll actually do training for you in your environment, on-site, at your organization with your tools. So real work actually gets done while you're doing that training. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started as well. We are using GoToWebinar. For those you can see, you should have a control panel somewhere on your screen. We do, like Bob mentioned just a little bit ago, we really encourage everybody to submit any questions that they may have in the questions panel you should have on that control panel. You can submit them at any point in time during the webinar. We may interject along the way with some of those questions, but if not, we'll have them at the Q&A session at the end. And I do want to let everybody know this session is being recorded, so everyone will receive a link to that recording within about 24 hours of this webinar being over. So you will have that for you to be able to play back or share with your colleagues as well. We do encourage you and appreciate you doing that. So to go over the agenda that we're going to be covering today, first off, Bob's going to be talking about traditional versus centralized models, and then kind of giving an overview of what a testing center of excellence actually is. And then he'll be talking about the process to build a testing center of excellence, the importance of an assessment during that process, and then we'll be doing some Q&A. But before we do that, we just kind of wanted to get an idea where everybody in the audience stood as far as testing center of excellence. So the first poll that we're going to be doing here is, does your organization currently have a testing center of excellence implemented? It's a simple yes/no answer. We do encourage everybody to give us that feedback so we can kind of know where everybody in the audience stands.
Yeah, please do participate in the poll question here. It really does help us just tweak the presentation, customize it based upon the audience, but we would love to get your input on this.
That's right. So we're going to give maybe about 30 more seconds to let everybody finish taking this poll. Shouldn't take anybody too long since it's a simple yes and no. And then we'll share that with you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results with everybody. So it looks like the majority of everybody attending does not currently have a testing center of excellence implemented, and I would assume, being on this webinar, that there is some interest in having one implemented. And then 32% of you do as well, so hopefully you're looking for some tips and tricks to make it better. Any feedback on those results, Bob? Are you surprised by that?
You know, I find those very interesting, and based, on the audience, it is, I would say the number that do not currently have a testing center of excellence already implemented is a little bit higher than normal, and we're actually going to go over some statistics shortly, and I'll present globally, what the statistics are for that.
All right. So now that we got that poll out of the way, I am going to officially hand it over to you, Bob. Bob, take it away.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you. So the first thing I just want to share with everybody is let's talk about the traditional silo model, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So the idea with the traditional silo model is that you've got separate project testing teams. I have no doubt that all of you are familiar with the challenges that can cause because, for example, you have no resources that are truly focused on the organization. And when I say organization, I'm talking about the big picture. What are the objectives and the goals of the organization as a whole relative to information technology? And it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to ensure consistent quality throughout the organization because you end up having different management teams. They end up being focused on particular business units or particular projects, and quite often each and every of those projects end up being handled quite differently. And then you've got varying budgets. So it really becomes just disparate, if you will, as to how it is being handled throughout the organization. And obviously the traditional silo model and the challenges that that brings is why so many organizations are adopting not only testing center of excellences, but Agile and DevOps, which eliminate those silos, which is a great thing. So the challenges with a decentralized testing model is the overwhelming demands. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I've been in IT now for 29 years. So I go back all the way to the mainframe days, where for the most part, we were dealing with, just the green screens, the dumb terminals, and the testing with that. But in today's day and age, we've got this new technology, and there seems to be new technologies coming out every day. So, 20, 25, 29 years ago, we certainly did not have to worry about mobile testing. We didn't have to worry about the Internet of Things. So, and the other thing that we didn't have to worry about were the market trends. So I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with the demands that you're dealing with, and quite often those demands being placed upon you, the tester, the QA expert, is due to your organization having to be competitive in the market. When you look at Yahoo, Google, Amazon, the approach they use so often is because they recognize the changes that have to be made to their applications and systems, and they've got to get those changes available to the end user as quickly as possible, again, in order to remain competitive. Then you've got inadequate application quality. So a big reason why the inadequacy of quality is so prevalent in this day and age is because we've got a much more educated end user. So they expect a certain amount of quality from the application that they're dealing with. And one of the things that you're seeing more and more in the news is that when that quality is not met, or, heaven forbid, quality leads to some sort of a bad experience, a data loss or something. Look at Facebook in the news recently. Look at a number of retail companies in the past couple of years. Their quality was not up to par. It created some issues on security, and that created some very bad public relations. You've got high production cost, delays in delivery schedules, and then just a lack of quality standards. So these are all different things that create challenges when it comes to the decentralized testing model. So let's talk about a testing center of excellence for a moment. Exactly what is that? So when we use that term, we're referring to a framework comprising strategic assets. So those assets are process, people, and technology, all three. And a testing center of excellence, the idea is that it will govern how a testing organization engages and delivers testing services to the larger enterprise. I know of many organizations that create their testing center of excellence and then actually associate a cost for different business units in their organization to utilize those testing services. Some organizations may refer to it as IV&V, independent verification and validation. And a testing center of excellence has established goals, well-defined processes, a governance mechanism, multidisciplined skill sets, and common tools and technologies that it dictates or at least recommends. So maybe it doesn't dictate, maybe it doesn't enforce, but it at least recommends and provides guidance on all of these to all of the various business units. So the first thing I'm going to point out on this slide, because we had discussed it during the poll, was according to the 2016-2017 World Quality Report, 54% of IT organizations say they are building or plan to build a testing center of excellence either in-house or through outsourcing. So when it comes to the benefits of Testing Center of Excellence, obviously when you see such a high percentage recognizing that they need to build a Testing Center of Excellence, it's obvious they recognize the value. So it's easier for the team to evolve existing testing services so they're more agile. And it makes it easier for them to offer new services, new testing services with higher quality. It also promotes a culture of quality. So for those of you in an Agile environment or DevOps environment, I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that culture is critical. You've got to have a buy-in from the team. The other benefit is that it's proven that it is a shorter time to market. So you're able to enhance the quality of your application and get it to market that much faster. Also decreased and optimized cost. One of the costs, for example, that I would point out is the learning curve among your organization. If you've got your organization agreeing to and adhering to different standards and policies that you enforce when it comes to testing, then it makes it that much easier for new hires to learn the process and adapt to that process. There's enhanced delivery confidence. I don't know how many of you in the audience conduct surveys of your end users to identify their level of confidence in the quality of the application that you're delivering to them, but that's something I highly recommend. And one of the things that statistics point out is that those organizations that utilize a TCoE realize a greater degree of delivery confidence. And then there's tighter alignment with business, with the organization. So again, when I use that term, I'm talking about the big picture. So the IT is in alignment with the business objectives and what they are ultimately trying to achieve, the vision, if you will. Now, it's not all, rainbows and unicorns when it comes to implementing a testing center of excellence. There are certainly implementation challenges. So those would include obtaining organizational commitment, because it is a significant effort. Setting of direction and priority. Quite often there can be a number of areas for disagreement when it comes to that. Provision of skills and knowledge. So, back 25, 29 years ago, technology obviously was not as robust as it is now. There were a limited number of methodologies utilized, not to mention not as robust technology, if you will. Whereas in this day and age, we've got all of these different methodologies, different SDLC models, and different technologies used not only for the development of applications and systems, but for the testing. The management of existing demands. Think about this for just a moment. Has your organization ever come to you and said, hey, we're going to implement this new initiative? Don't worry about anything else. Don't continue to test. Everything else can stop. We want you to focus on the implementation of this new initiative. Now, I don't know about any of you, but that has never happened to me. So the fact is that when you're implementing any kind of new initiative, especially a testing center of excellence, you still have to perform your day-to-day task. Life goes on. The business goes on. And then there's lack of attention during the end-to-end duration. So sometimes it's very easy for organizations to lose focus. Again, implementing a testing center of excellence, it is a significant effort. It takes time. It takes commitment. So these are just some of the challenges that you may be faced with. Now, in looking at this slide, some great information here. And this slide, I want to give full credit to the 2016-2017 World Quality Report, which is where, Brent, we got that information from.
Yep, that's correct.
Now, some of you might be looking at this and saying, well, this looks like it might be a tribute to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And
just
specifically Raphael. That's right, in the side. When I saw that, that's what I thought of. I know that my grandkids and even my adult kids would think of that, but that is not the case. We are giving tribute to the approaches to the Test Center of Excellence. And I want to bring up a slightly different term, which is going to sound identical. So you'll notice that on the far right, it talks about decentralizing a testing center of excellence for improved agility and efficiency. So a lot of organizations that have implemented a testing center of excellence have now started to realize, well, wait a minute, if we're going to be as fully agile as we want to be, if we are going to fully embrace DevOps, then perhaps what we need to do is decentralize some of our efforts. So with the decentralized testing center of excellence, when it becomes a bit more decentralized, you have what is, and I'm going to go over to the far left, a TEC, which is a Testing Excellence Center. So a Testing Excellence Center is a thin layer, if you will, or a thinner layer than a full-blown TCoE. And what it does is a TEC will cover for the organization's standards, policies, guidelines, methodologies, education, etc., but it will not necessarily dictate or set standards as to which solutions are going to be used. Because one of the things that we've come to realize, especially in large organizations, is, for our accounting group, our financial group, perhaps they need to use some third-party ERP application. And because of that, they require a different solution, a different technology in order to perform their testing. And then we've got this group over here that perhaps we've created an in-house customized application. And again, they require a completely different technology in order to successfully validate the application in the system there. So here you see some interesting metrics, though. You'll notice right in the middle that as of 2017, 28% of organizations of those surveyed use crowdsourcing solution model for a quick test capacity in their testing center of excellence. And then you'll notice that, right over here to the right of the center, 26% in 2017 use a managed service model with an expert QA vendor. So they outsource it, if you will. Whereas just as recently as 2016, 49% used a managed service model with an expert QA vendor. So some interesting information to just give you an idea of the trends in regard to a testing center of excellence and the Test Excellence Center. So Brent, I think we have another poll that we'd like the audience to take if they would.
Yes, we do. I will launch that now. The question is, what do you believe would be your organization's main challenge in implementing a testing center of excellence? Do you think it would be getting executive buy-in and commitment, approval of the necessary budget, obtaining those expertise and skill sets needed, or overcoming the organizational politics? So once again, we're going to give everybody about a full minute to take this poll, and then we'll share those results.
And again, thank you so much for participating in this poll.
Yes, we do appreciate it. And every time we do polls, I can't help but hear the Jeopardy theme in my head. Every time. But I won't hum it. I'll save everybody. I'll save everybody that.
You won't torture them today.
Nope, not today. Maybe next time. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and share the results. So it looks like the large majority of everybody, 59%, is overcoming organizational politics. I got to say I'm surprised that only 7% is getting executive buy-in and commitment. Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I am not surprised at all in regard to overcoming organizational politics. Without a doubt, that is a significant challenge because, you know, that is where earlier we were talking about culture, and that's where culture comes in.
Yep.
But Brent, like you, I am surprised that only 7% mentioned getting executive buy-in and commitment. So that's a great sign. That's a really great sign because it shows that, you know, leadership, I honestly believe that in the past few years, they've started getting better at being in touch with the real world. You know, I think that in the past several years, a significant amount of respect has been obtained when it comes to quality and software testing. I remember many years ago when testers, we felt like we were the Rodney Dangerfields, and some of you folks out there in the audience, you know, probably don't remember who Rodney Dangerfield was, but he was a comedian whose gimmick was the fact that he just never got any respect.
I get no respect. That's
right. That's right. And then just approval of necessary budget and obtaining expertise and skill sets at 17%. So, you know, both definitely challenges. But normally those top three are a little bit more even. So again, thank you so much to the audience for sharing that. We appreciate that. So now I'm going to dive into the process to build a testing center of excellence, a 5-step approach, if you will. And we intentionally use this pyramid because it truly is representative of the level of effort that I would submit to you should go into building a testing center of excellence. So you'll notice step 1 is conducting a survey. Step 2, perform a detailed assessment. Step 3, design and build your TCoE. Number 4, start with pilot projects. And 5, adopt the TCoE. And I'm going to go over each of these steps, but we will zero in on the assessment process because that's such a significant portion of the process to build the TCoE. So step 1, conducting a survey. So think of a self-assessment. You know, perhaps you come up with a questionnaire, you're distributing it to your organization. One of the primary goals is you want to understand how your organization is ensuring quality today. It's very difficult to get to where you want to be if you don't know where you are today. Focus on people, processes, and technology. We mentioned that early on. Clarify and solidify the objectives. So you want to do that, you know, glean some information from your survey, but also make sure you communicate that to those taking the survey. In all likelihood, that will significantly increase participation. While you're conducting the survey, make sure that you identify all of the stakeholders. You know, who is impacted by the quality of the application? That's a high-level question that you can use as a rule of thumb in order to identify stakeholders. I mean, is it somebody that cares or should care when it comes to the quality of your application? Identify the budget. And when we talk about budget, don't just think dollar signs. Think about the level of effort. Think about the time involved, because that equates to money as well. Obtain both executive management and stakeholder commitment. And one of the ways that you do that is by being able to communicate, by being able to articulate the benefit and value of a testing center of excellence. So again, step 1, conduct the survey. Think of it as a self-assessment. Then you're going to dive in and perform the assessment. So when performing an assessment, we're talking about a very analytical, detailed process that is performed to better understand where you are, where you want to get to, and how to get there. So it's focused on people, processes, all of the different environments, the solutions that you're utilizing, as well as the objectives and the goals of your organization, both high level and at the IT level. And an assessment can certainly be tailored. So our organization does a significant amount of assessments. There have been situations where organizations feel as though they've done a great job of assessing their environments, their prod environment, their test environments, their dev environments, and they might ask us to come in to provide an assessment relative to the skill sets of their team. Again, to come up with a plan to help that team get to where they need to be in order to implement a testing center of excellence. Step 3, design and build your testing center of excellence. So you want to establish automated business processes. And we're not just talking about test automation there. We're talking about, if you're DevOps, if you're looking into continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, you've got to have automation to automate the deployment of your code into other stages. Ensure that you put in place a leadership structure. So, for example, make sure that you identify an executive sponsor, the steering committee, who's going to be on that, what skill sets do you need? Identify IT and business subject matter experts. Also come up with your champions and mentors. So you need this leadership structure. You need the executive sponsor, the steering committee. You need all of this to help you move that enormous boulder, which is a TCoE, up that hill. But once you do so, it will pay huge dividends. Ensure that you define processes for continuous improvement. That is critical. Make sure that you do a lessons learned. Anytime you undertake an initiative, regardless of how many times you've done it before, each time you do it, take the time to do a lessons learned to identify, hey, what did we do right? Because we want to make sure we do it again. What could we have done better so that next time we do it better? These are all things that you want to do. And then eventually you'll start to evolve and create your best practices. Step 4, start with a pilot project. So it can be 1, we recommend 3, prove and succeed. So you want to make sure, think about the engineering process, PDCA, plan. So plan the work in small increments, do it, then check on what you've just done. So continuous improvement, identify action items, and then execute, act upon those action items. So plan, do, check, act on your pilot project. It will, once you're ready to implement more and larger projects, it will go that much easier. And then you're ready to adopt across the enterprise. So prioritize your projects, enforce inherence. So, that's one of the most difficult things to do, because how do you enforce your team to adhere, or your organization? I would propose that you use a carrot. It is very important that you heavily communicate as you go. Make sure your organization, all of the stakeholders, leadership, and those involved feel a certain amount of ownership, that they're held accountable. And then also, very importantly, make sure that they understand the value and the benefits, and that they experience the wins when you have those wins. Communicate the capabilities of the TCoE, measure and track the results, and as I mentioned, share the wins. So we're going to focus on assessments for a moment. And as I mentioned, this is something we do a great deal of. 60 to 70% of the time implementing a testing center of excellence is spent on step 1 and 2, and that is time well spent, because detailed strategic planning pays off. And once you perform your due diligence for steps 1 and 2, then you will see steps 3, 4, 5 to adopt, starting with a pilot and then actually designing and building, go that much smoother. So what are the benefits? So what are the benefits of an assessment specifically? By doing an assessment, you're able to proactively identify the considerations, challenges, and issues specific to implementing a TCoE. It provides you some opportunities for immediate improvement in your implementation process so that you can correct those on the fly. You're able to identify requirements and evaluation criteria, as well as the gaps and deficiencies. And by identifying those, you're able to figure out, okay, what is it that we need? What have we got to do in order to correct this? So start the development of your TCoE strategy and implementation plan during the assessment. So the approach to an assessment, interview as many of those involved with quality assurance and quality control with testing. Interview as many of them as possible. Explain what you're doing and why. Believe me, they will end up being so much more cooperative. Utilize what I call diplomatic assertiveness. So whenever anybody answers one of your questions in a diplomatic way, challenge that question. Utilize what is called in the engineering world the 5 whys. And the 5 whys, I'm saying WHY, why the question. So anytime they answer one of your questions, ask them, well, why is that? Why is it done that way? Why is that the case? And let them answer, and then ask why again if it makes sense. A lot of times it just takes a bit of time to truly uncover the truth. Utilize a structured assessment report format. So have an outline and certain evaluation sections with very granular recommendations, findings, etc. And I'm gonna show you an outline for that in just a moment for an assessment which you're welcome to use. And I know, Brent, you mentioned earlier that this was being recorded. If any of you would like to email me, I'll be more than happy to send this to you in a PDF format. And then we're going to provide our emails at the end if you have any questions for us after the webinar.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So here are the focus areas when it comes to an assessment focused on implementing a testing center of excellence. So obviously, number 1, the assessment introduction. We're going to explain why it is that you're doing this. Then have an executive summary report. Face it, the executives in an organization are typically very, very busy. Identify at a high level the findings of the report, the recommended next steps or the roadmap. Try to create an executive summary that is no more, if at all possible, than 2 pages. 3, have an environment overview. So an environment overview is, about the organization as a whole, its environment, the applications that are being tested, the team as a whole. Afterwards, you're going to see we talk about the prod and test environment in a moment. But environment overview, that's the big picture. Section 4 would include the quality assurance and quality control team experience, the skills that they have, training evaluation. So what training have they had? What training do they need? A QA and QC process documentation evaluation. So what kind of documentation is there? Are there guidelines? Is there a structured format? Are there templates for the documentation? Where is the documentation stored? What kind of repository is there? How easy is it for Brent here to go in and find the application specs or the use cases specific to certain functionality? Section 6 would be the production and test environment evaluation. So when it comes to your test environment, is that a mirror of prod? Is it a subset? Are there any types of applications that exist in your testing environment that do not exist in prod, or vice versa? Section 7 would include a test design process evaluation. Are there standards and guidelines for how a test or a test case should be designed? Are there certain protocols, naming conventions, etc., that are being utilized? Section 8. What's the automation experience of the team relative to the tool experience, skill? What kind of training have they had? What kind of training do they need? In regard to the training that they have, has it been structured classroom training? Has it been mentoring? Has it been strictly of their own initiative by going out to YouTube and watching all sorts of videos? Section 9 would have test process documentation evaluation. So the documentation as far as how the test plan should be created, the testing process. Make sure that you have a section for defect reporting and management evaluation. Have a section for the roadmap and testing center of excellence implementation strategy. So the roadmap, that's where you're going to identify the action items. How do you get to where you want to be? What has to be done? Make sure that you define measurable action items with a specific target date and timeline in mind. And then, of course, have a summary at the end. So this gives you an example, and you can certainly, as I may have mentioned, use this as a table of contents. But this is what our typical assessment report, when we do an assessment of a full-blown quality assurance and software testing organization, that's what this will include. So on the assessment introduction, no more than one page, what, why, who, when, and where. You introduce what's being assessed, the purpose, the standards and guidelines. So all of that great information to justify, if you will, provide justification on why this assessment is being done and what the ultimate goal is. The executive summary, that would be an overview of the organizational challenges, opportunities for improvement, high-level organizational recommendations, and the benefits, the return on investment. Remember, your executives, the leadership in your organization, they're concerned about the money. They've got to be profitable. The business has to sustain itself. On environment overview, these are all of the different things that we're looking for. So make sure that you take a look at the testing methodologies being utilized throughout the organization. The team experience and training. So I mentioned the testing skill and knowledge on automational, functional, manual, test planning, test management. You can certainly add application security if it's appropriate, performance testing. And then you can even get more granular into specific technologies such as, Internet of Things. Get even more granular if you want to talk about the development solutions being used. So what's their expertise on Selenium, TestNG, UFT? And then also, the other key thing is when it comes to your team, measure their ability to understand and comprehend test strategy. When it comes to test strategy, the analogy that I use quite often is relative to the game of chess. You know, a lot of times, I might ask a group, hey, how many of you know how to play chess? And you might see 75 or 80% of the class raise their hands. And then I'll say, all right, honestly, how many of you simply know how to move the pieces? So it's that same way I found a lot of times with testing, that you might have a tester who's been testing for several years, but if they don't understand why they're executing a specific test at a specific point in time, and they're telling you, well, I'm executing this because it's the next one in my plan, then they might not fully understand the test strategy. So evaluate, assess that with your team. Look at the process documentation. So, you know, what kind of documentation is there? Are there any best practices that are documented? What kind of recommendations might there be? So just a number of different areas in regard to quality assurance and quality control that you might have testing defined. So for the production and test environment, you know, an overview, that's where I mentioned, remember, is it a subset? Is it a mirror? What kind of technologies are you utilizing for the prod and test environments? How many different environments do you have? I did quite a bit of consulting on an FBI project several years ago, and they had numerous environments, and each migration into each environment, we would end up doing extensive testing, which allowed us to handle or address, if you will, numerous scenarios and conditions. So for test design process, evaluating that, you know, how are the automated testers, manual testers, and the business all integrated? I've been in some organizations where the testers have to perform both manual testing as well as the creation, execution, and analysis of the automated testing. And that can be very challenging if you've got to implement test automation at the same time as doing your day-to-day testing. It can almost become an impossible task. Make sure that you conduct an overview of your existing test cases and the test case library management. I once went into an organization in Louisiana, and when I initially got there, they had a little over 1,500 test cases. 3 weeks later, after I had left, they had a little over 700. And it was because they had that many redundant test cases. So even with the 700, they were validating and verifying the exact same number of requirements as they were before, but now they had a much cleaner. So think about the value of that. So first off, it's too bad they didn't understand it initially, because it would have saved them from developing so many test cases they didn't need. But the good news is that once they cleaned up that library, they had a much more efficient test plan that was still just as effective, and it decreased the amount of maintenance that they had to perform on those test cases. So in the test design process evaluation, the overview of your test plan and the test library, very, very important. Make sure that you take a look at the automated test execution process and the metrics. So, you know, that's something where you want to take a look at the automated test execution process. Are your automated tests being scheduled to run unattended in a distributed fashion? Or are they all being executed on just one machine instead of scheduling to disperse over 10 or 15 different machines, maybe in the middle of the night while we're all home watching Game of Thrones? Make sure you identify very specific metrics for your test execution. So, perhaps the automated versus manual execution defect catch rate. Which one is finding more defects? The successful versus non-successful test runs. So in looking at the test process documentation, look for completeness, clarity, accessibility. I mentioned earlier, how easy is it for your team to find specific documentation? Is your team adhering to the documentation? And then list the findings and recommendations relative to that. For the test execution process and metrics evaluation, I've always considered measures and metrics not as answering questions, but providing me information so that I can identify better questions. So that's how I use measures and metrics. So make sure that those are providing meaningful information to you. Make sure that you're able to figure out what areas, you might need to create and adopt new processes. Are your measures and metrics being used to help drive and change behavior when appropriate? Do you have any individuals or team members that are being held accountable, and are there standards in regard to how you're measuring different factors in your testing process? And then for defects, make sure you have a reporting and tracking process. Make sure that there's a remediation process. How many of you have been in an organization where they were just fantastic at finding and reporting defects, but then all of a sudden, you'd go into whatever defect tracking solution they were using and you'd say, well, wait a minute. We've got 150 defects that have been open for 3 or 4 weeks, and 25% of them are critical. So yeah, they're finding and reporting defects, but they're not tracking the progress. Are they getting resolved? You've got to have also traceability. So with your defects, that should very easily map back to a requirement, use case, a user story, all depending upon the approach, the methodology that you're using, but you've got to have traceability. And then, of course, it goes without saying your defects, there needs to be verbiage in them, a template or wording, so that it enforces the practice of ensuring that you can replicate that defect. From my developer years as a developer, nothing was more frustrating to get a defect which I could not duplicate in the dev environment. So then you make sure that you come up with your roadmap and the Center of Excellence implementation strategy, detailed action items, timeline and targets, milestones. You want to specify the needs, the dependencies. Who are the responsible resources? Identify the target dates, potential roadblocks. So what are the risks involved? What could happen that can get in our way and stop us from achieving our goal, as well as any other critical information that might be necessary. And then obviously have a summary. So we are about to open it up to Q&A and get some of the questions here, but in summary, we've gone through the traditional versus centralized models, a testing center of excellence overview, the process, the 5-step process, but we really focused on 2 of them, conducting the survey and then especially performing the assessment. And then I shared with you the content of the detailed assessment report. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brent. Brent, do we have any questions?
We do actually, and we want to be conscious of everybody's time and try to stick right within the hour. So we're going to sneak a few of these in, but any ones that we do not get to, we will be following up with answers to those questions to you. Just give us a week or 2 to get those answers filled out and submitted back to you, but we'll have them to you, no doubt. some great questions here. So let me start with this one, Bob. What is the turnaround time for establishing a testing center of excellence from the ground up?
So great question. So from the ground up, so let me give you two answers here. To have it implemented to the point where you can do a pilot project, on average, I would say 3 to 4 months. To once you've embraced it and committed, though, to have it fully implemented throughout the organization, typically you would be talking about anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
Okay, great. And before I go to the next question, I do want to encourage everybody, if you when you do sign off, you'll be prompted to provide a post-webinar survey. We really want you to participate in that survey. It's only, I think, 5 questions long, super easy, just kind of rating 1 to 5, that sort of thing. But your feedback is very valuable to us. Okay, next question here, Bob. What if I can't get executive buy-in for building a testing center of excellence? That's
well, yeah. I mean, if you cannot get executive buy-in, then I would ask, well, what have you done thus far to try to get executive buy-in? So what kind of justification have you provided? How have you articulated the benefits and value of doing that? What are the reasons you cannot get buy-in? I mean, it's just as your previous question, as to how long something will take in regard to buy-in, there's so many different variables. So it really does depend on so many different factors.
Yep. So essentially, you're saying don't stop with the initial no. Earn that buy-in.
Correct. Exactly.
All right. Next question. Let's see here. Oh, this is a good one. What are the success measures for a testing center of excellence organization?
So that's something that you should determine early on. How is it you're going to identify success? And do that by ensuring that you have quantifiable objectives, goals, where you can say, okay, if we achieve this goal, this objective by this timeline, we will consider that to be a win. So what some organizations that I'm finding more and more popular are surveys among the end users, because I'm one of those. I firmly believe that we on the development side and on the testing side, we can do everything right. I'm sure all of you have experienced this. You've done everything right. You've tested every single requirement. You've executed every single test case. You've resolved the defects, and it got pushed into production. And within a few days, you've got an end user saying, no, this isn't right. Well, it might be right based upon the requirements, etc., but it's not right according to them, so it's not fit for use. So those are the things that, the end user, so I rely upon them heavily conducting surveys and evaluations and providing feedback on the quality. So that's one of the measures that I would use.
Okay, great. Getting a little low on time here, so we'll just try to grab a couple more. Here's a good one. What are the key roles necessary for making a testing center of excellence successful?
So some of the key roles, you've got to have an executive sponsor. Mm-hmm. Very, very critical. You've got to have champions to help move it along. If you can have a steering committee, I don't want to say that that's critical, but it definitely eases the process of implementing, just because, all of us are smarter than any one of us. So the more people you can get involved that accept ownership of the TCoE, the better.
All right. And then let's grab this one last question here. And again, I see a lot of questions in here. We will definitely follow up with all these after the webinar and get you some answers. But this one, in a real-world testing center of excellence implementation, especially in financial services area, what would you say was the single most, what would be the biggest obstacle? So I think this kind of goes back to the polling question we asked near the beginning. But would it differ from industry to industry? I wouldn't imagine it.
So the way that I could see it differing from industry to industry would be, and let me talk about risk and risk avoidance. So how can quality or a lack of quality impact the organization? So think about healthcare for just a moment. You could potentially be talking on a healthcare application, a health provider, for example. You could be talking about a loss of life.
Right.
I did some work for an organization where a defect was discovered, that there was a specific application physicians would use to prescribe medicines, and there was a defect discovered where a decimal point was automatically being moved over one. So can you imagine when prescribing a medicine, somebody getting not enough or too much of the medicine?
Yeah.
So that's a huge factor. I mean, and then the other thing to look at, you mentioned financial, then there's also the application security piece, where that's a huge risk. What happens if somebody gets a hold of our data? What can they do with it?
Right.
So that's how I could see it differing from industry to industry.
Excellent.
So one other, thing that I would recommend. Now, I know somebody asked for a company who has one QA team now. Are there any changes to the process you've discussed? One thing that I would mention is to be thinking of the vision, the big picture, and when your organization may end up having multiple silos.
Absolutely. Okay, so, and again, there's some more questions in there. We'll get to them, I promise. We'll follow up with you guys afterwards. But we wanted to kind of just share some of the upcoming events that Checkpoint Technologies as an organization will be sponsoring or attending. Very soon, actually, Bob, you'll be there in Boston at the Agile Testing Days conference. So anybody that's planning on attending that conference, feel free to reach out to Bob. If you want to pick his brain or anything, stop by our booth, make use of us being there. And then after that, we're going to be out in Anaheim, California for the Star West conference. And then very shortly after that, STPCon Fall in Arlington, Virginia, where actually, Bob, you're going to be a keynote speaker there as well as presenting.
Yes, I am very excited. I'm honored to have been accepted as a keynote speaker at STPCon at their fall conference. And STP, by the way, stands for Software Test Professionals. A great conference, but I will be there in October, and I'll also be doing a presentation on risk analysis when it comes to testing.
Awesome. And then we just want to share, as a thank you for joining us, here's our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you have that you didn't get a chance to put into the questions panel. We do appreciate all those questions, and we do want to get back to them. We do really encourage everybody to take part in that post-webinar survey that you'll see once you log out of here. Everybody will receive a copy of the recording to this webinar. Please feel free to share it with anybody that you think would be of value. And with that, on behalf of all of us here at Checkpoint Technologies, we want to thank you again for joining our webinar.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah, enjoy your day. Thank you so much.